is a disclaimer. Wow! My opinions are not canon. This may not be intentional by the author. I only think that Jack Skellington is autistic. It may be so. It may not be so. We'll never know. Anyway, here's my headcanon. Nightmare Before Christmas is a classic that has touched our hearts from the time that we were children, even up to present day. I personally know my brother still watches Nightmare Before Christmas each Halloween as a tradition. It's beloved by my family and friends alike. The merchandise of the franchise as well should be an obvious indicator as to its popularity. That being said, it astounds me that something so omnipresent has yet to be revealed for what it truly is. Autistic representation. Yes, autistic representation! I'm not crazy! You can't look me in the eye and tell me that Jack Skellington isn't the most autistic person you've ever seen in your life! My fiance and I watched this movie and were absolutely astounded, me to the extreme, as to just the extent to which I could relate to Jack Skellington as an autistic person myself. That big, tall, smiling skeleton that we all know and love is absolutely not at all neurotypical by any stretch of the imagination. And I have researched and studied and analyzed this film with my fiance extensively in order to seek in-film examples that prove this fact. Our focus will be to prove exactly how and why Jack Skellington is autistic, and how his autism impacts him and furthers the plot of the film. One of the first scenes of our film is the song that we probably most associate with Nightmare Before Christmas. This is Halloween, this is Halloween. During this, we see the man himself, Jack Skellington, performing in front of the denizens of Halloween Town. They hail him as their Pumpkin King as he sets his very body ablaze and he dances about flame and bone, haunting and dazzling them in delight. This is all well and good, but what comes next is what arched my brow. Once he was done with his performance, the people of Halloween Town eagerly flocked to him in order to praise his well-done act. While they only praised him and thought nothing but the highest, he was simply overwhelmed by the social interaction. Now stop. Jack Skellington was scared to engage in social activity, even when confronted by people who adored him, and even went so far as to flee from their company and into an empty graveyard. This is an experience that I, a person who is autistic myself, can heavily relate to. I very much have the same issues when interacting with family get-togethers. These people thought the highest of me and loved me unconditionally, but I would also retreat from them, as their presence was a bit overwhelming. So I would hide in the basement during the family get-togethers for about 15 minutes or so before going back, because I needed that 15 minutes to be alone, just like Jack Skellington. But being overwhelmed and needing some alone time is just the beginning. Where does him being autistic and overwhelmed lead him? To the next scene, where the song Jack's Lament takes place. Here, he sings about how Halloween simply isn't doing it for him, that there is an emptiness somewhere deep within that continues to overtake him. He feels hollow inside. My theory is that for a time, it was Halloween that was his special interest. A special interest, for those who do not know, is an autistic person's obsession. For Isaac Newton, it was gravity, and for Jack Skellington, it was Halloween. What they don't usually tell you is that an autistic person's special interest may be subject to change throughout the course of their life. One person need not attach themselves to a single hyperfixation for all time. It can change. Another thing that people don't talk about is the feeling of emptiness that one may feel between autistic hyperfixations. Almost like there's a lack of purpose. Like there's nothing to be had in life. Nothing to fascinate and give someone the spark that they need to feel joy. It can indeed lead to a great depression. At least, that's coming from my own personal experience being autistic. I used to be obsessed with shy guys, for instance, and now I'm obsessed with clowns. Go figure. But the space between those two obsessions was lonely, sad, empty, purposeless. Just like Jack is stating how he feels in Jack's Lament. Another thing to observe. Throughout the entirety of the film, how many people would you say Jack Skellington actually treats as his friends? The answer is absolutely 0. Yes, pun intended, because the only friend that Jack seems to have is his ghostly canine companion, Zero. Everyone regards him and hails him as their beloved Pumpkin King, from the mad scientist doctor, who welcomes him without hesitation into his home, which makes sense since he's the Pumpkin King, to the smiling mayor of Halloween Town. But that doesn't mean that he has any particular attachments to them. Clearly, Jack may express some type of gratitude, but I've never seen him treat a single one of these adoring denizens as something like a close friend. When the Mad Doctor invites Jack into his home, the Pumpkin King only states that he's there for
a series of experiments,
business purposes, and that he's been conducting experiments of some kind, which we shall discuss in further detail later. Autistic people have always had trouble making and maintaining friendships, no matter how they may be viewed in the eye of the public. I know that I, myself, had quite a similar experience in my teenhood during high school. When I was young, people loved me. Everyone knew me by name. They hailed me every time I walked down the hallways. They would go like, "Look, it's Kobe! Look at that amazing clown!" And I guess I would be appreciative, but very, very confused as to how they knew my name, and even more confused about why a stranger would like me so much. The point is, being showered by praise from so many adoring people can be interesting, but just because an autistic person is well received doesn't mean that they'll have any less of a difficult time forming meaningful connections with those people. Jack Skellington is no exception, hence why the only character that Jack truly regards with deep companionship is his dog, Zero. Zero is not a person. Zero doesn't have any kingly expectations of Jack. Zero doesn't overwhelm Jack with his questions or social endeavors, no pressing conversations to rack the nerves. All Zero does is offer wordless companionship, which is something that Jack sorely needs. Furthermore, our protagonist was guided by that very same dog and finds himself wandering through a deep, forested area. There, he finds a circle of trees, each with their own respective symbol. But none of them captured Jack's interest specifically, although Jack did seem to take intrigue in the fact that there was something new to observe. He seemed more perplexed by the fact that he hadn't noticed this before. It was only when he saw the door to Christmas Town that changed his interest. The reason is because of the way that the Christmas tree colorfully glistens wonder before his eyes. It sparkles, it's shiny, it's visually pleasing for the eyes. Now, autistic people, usually in children but potentially in some adults, can be drawn into colorful and sparkly items or works of art. There are entire hourglasses, in fact, designed around appeasing autistic children and adults' visual stimulation-seeking behavior. The mere fact that the colorful tree was sparkling delighted his visual senses and sparked the flames of fascination in Jack's empty eye sockets. He could not resist temptation. He opened the door before falling into Christmas Town. There in Christmas Town, we can see Jack Skellington display firstly a trip into endless excitement. Quite literally, he trips and he tumbles down a snowy hill and into the unknown. Autistic people are actually usually poorly coordinated and can be noticed through either rigid and robotic movements, such as very stiff and precise movements, or very over-exaggerated movements. While every person is a person, being clumsy is a trait of autism as well. Lord knows I personally have numerous times been merely like standing there in neutral position and then tripped over my own 2 feet upon first step. But that is my own experience. In Christmas Town itself, he is utterly enraptured by the sheer number of stimuli. Did you know that it is possible for an autistic person to actually embrace the sheer number of external stimuli? Taste, touch, smell, sight, sounds, and to be gleeful about it? Again, no two autistic people are the same. It is equally possible for an autistic person to be overwhelmed in a negative way and require solitude and silence, just as we saw Jack needed earlier when confronted by others in a social environment. But it is my theory that Jack Skellington, upon arriving at Christmas Town, is being bombarded with a plethora of too many thoughts and too many sights and senses, and rather than be negatively overwhelmed, becomes unfathomably elated with excitement with the wonders he's found, despite being wholly unfamiliar with the sense of this substance one may call snow. He takes a bite out of the snow to taste it. He touches it. He feels the coldness on his skeleton palm. He tumbles down the mountain and he feels it engulf him before he emerges from a small snow pile. He isn't overwhelmed. Every last atom of his being is metaphorically vibrating with excitement. And thusly he shouts, "What is this?" But oh, that is not the end. After discovering the wonders of Christmas Town, Jack Skellington's spark in life has been rejuvenated. He has unlocked his next special interest, a new hyperfixation to dedicate himself to study, to understand from the ground up. Excited as he is, Jack quickly rushes back to his home in Halloween Town in order to do what lots of autistic people do about their special interest: info dump. Although he doesn't regard any of them as necessarily friends, he still wants to share this with every living soul that he knows, which is incredibly autistic behavior. I should know, considering that I have done the same thing, talking people's ears off about clown ethics. Did you know there are clown vows, by the way? Jack Skellington shares his discoveries with the people about Christmas Town, but there is some form of miscommunication between them. Despite Jack's best efforts, he's unable to convey an understanding about his passions with the people they're surrounding. He has visions and experiences far different than that of the average denizen of Halloween Town. They just can't grasp what he sees. This in itself is very autistic indeed. My poor fiancée has to listen to me talk about incredibly complicated story ideas and can only just nod her head slowly. If you're watching this, I love you, sweetie. Our next example of autistic behavior, perhaps the most damning piece of evidence in this film, is Jack's obsession. Everyone in town knows that there is something up with Jack, something up with Jack. Giving up momentarily on trying to explain it to others, he merely continues to study it for himself to truly unravel his new special interest, Christmas. Rather than use feelings to understand a sentimental holiday, he turns to the scientific method for guidance, a book that happens to be in his library. First, he gets help from a cohort in science, the mad doctor responsible for Sally's creation. This man offers to help Jack by giving him equipment necessary so he can further analyze this so-called Christmas, as the Pumpkin King desperately tries to discern what makes it tick. He studies every book about the holidays, learning every rhyme and memorizing every story about the holidays there is to know, clearly indulging in his new hyperfixation. Analyzing a feeling using the scientific method, and trying to write equations on a chalkboard, calculating something sentimental, all while self-isolating from others and ignoring everyone and everything from the outside world so he can study, alone, in his room, is the very image of autism. He's trying to mathematically calculate or scientifically replicate the feeling that is Christmas, studying it, ripping it apart down to the smallest detail, all while still failing to understand the nature of it, due to its sentimentality. Like an autistic person at their finest, Jack Skellington is looking for a deeper meaning in simplicity, where no deeper meaning exists. An autistic urge to understand why. It is very much in autistic nature to overthink and overthink and overthink again, often cycling over the same incident or subject again and again until an answer has been reached. Sally's attempts to express romantic affection to Jack, while during this period, went completely unnoticed. It's true that when Jack received gifts from Sally, that he seemed fascinated by them, showed interest and was appreciative, but he missed the entire purpose of the gift's function as a romantic gesture. Rather than look at a smoky butterfly emerging from a potion bottle and think romance, he merely saw it as a fascinating spectacle to behold. He found it entertaining and gave his thanks to Sally before continuing to focus on his hyperfixation. Look me in the eyes, except don't, and tell me that missing an obvious romantic gesture isn't the most autistic thing an adult can do. It's happened so many times to me personally, even between me and my fiancée. Sometimes she has to openly point out the fact that she's flirting with me, otherwise it just goes over my head. But that still isn't everything. He never once stops to think about how Sandy Claus may feel about being kidnapped. He merely apologizes to Santa and says something along the lines of, "It's nothing personal," and that it's all in the pursuit of science, and is sure that Santa understands. It's quite normal for autistic people to struggle with empathy. Not in being rude. Some autistic people can be the sweetest people you've ever met, who would never harm a fly, but may sometimes innocently fail to consider another person's perspective. Not for lack of caring or ill intention, but for a lack of notice. At least, that's how it's gone in my personal experiences as well. I'll do a certain all-elusive something that bothers people, and then I'll earn their contempt because I hadn't thought to consider what they may have felt about me doing this certain something. That was a constant problem during childhood, but I'm happy to have grown and learned as time's progressed. To add yet more evidence onto the pile, Jack Skellington has a difficult time discerning the feelings of others. When he goes about impersonating Santa Claus, he delivers the horrific presents to people there below his sleigh one by one. And like clockwork, they each begin to scream a blood-curdling wail of terror as they are haunted by the spectacles that the Pumpkin King sneaks into their homes. Each monstrosity unique and handcrafted, Jack cannot think of a reason why they may be screaming in terror, but instead feels they're screaming in elation. He simply cannot discern their feelings. Not being able to understand what goes on in the minds of others, not being able to make sense of their feelings is a common autistic experience that many people struggle with. Once again, he can't see how what he's doing is wrong. Kidnapping a man and impersonating his likeness all in the pursuit of his special interests is an act of science. Science, I tell you. What's more, when the police and military begin to shoot Jack's sleigh from out of the sky, he simply cannot fathom why they would be doing so. He's blinded by his vision, coupled with his inability to empathize or understand others, and completed with being socially oblivious as he was with Sally. He simply cannot wrap his mind around how or why he's earned the contempt of the people shooting at him with their tanks. It's mind-boggling. Failing to understand how he's wronged others, he's shot down from the sky, suffering from the consequences of bad behavior, whose ill-mannered nature was unbeknownst to him. What have I done is the ultimate form of autistic despair. You know you've done something wrong. You know that you've hurt others. You know that other people are angry at you, but you never intended for this to happen. The only thing that Jack wanted was to bring happiness to those around him, and to participate in the merriment that others shared. But not understanding the social rules and norms, he failed. And his failure was written in the soot and broken machinery of his shattered dreams, his decimated vision. And he was only left there, shot down, to reflect over what he'd done. How could he have been so blind to the needs of others? All he could do was curse the blood in his marrow and blame the nature of his existence as someone different. This is the suffering of a well-meaning autistic person, one who unintentionally brings harm for engaging in an ever-mysterious something that brings great anger to those around. But this is not the end of the film. It doesn't end there in the ashes of his decimated dreams. He picks himself up from the ashes and rises his old self. He realizes that what he's done is wrong, and upon reaching this conclusion, wishes to rectify his actions. By nature of being a good person, Jack wants to make amends for his wrongs, and wants to restore what has been damaged by his blindness. Once he can finally see past his ever-powerful vision, he knows just what to do to make things right. Restore Christmas by rescuing Santa Claus, the very man he sent with lock, shock, and barrel to capture. The crescendo happens as we know he defeats Oogie Boogie, saves the day, and then frees Santa Claus. But afterwards, he finally sees that Sally has been there by his side this entire time, trying to do things in his best interest. Whether it was socialize with him while he was in the midst of his hyperfixation, or prevent him from seizing Christmas for his own, Sally has always been tenderly acting in Jack's best interest, almost since the beginning. Jack returns Sally's love in a very autistic manner, very hard and very fast. Now, mind you, autism is a spectrum, and there are many ways that people can express their sentiments, autistic or not. Some people with autism may struggle to voice their feelings for someone at all. Others may not be able to understand boundaries or social rules and do so far too quickly. Others still may know exactly how the heart works and express themselves just the right way. Ultimately, the autistic experience is varied, just as the human experience should be. Jack, on the other hand, falls hard and fast for Sally, who he now realizes has feelings for him. And at the end of the film, he's quick to honestly and fully return those feelings with every fiber of his being. It's a little bit awkward and a little bit strange, but honestly, she was quite content to finally have her feelings returned, so good for them! In conclusion, Jack Skellington is a very interesting character. He needed a hyperfixation to experience joy, found it after being overstimulated, and was blinded to all others from indulging in his special interest. Unable to see Sally's love at the beginning, he put his passions first and paid the price when he couldn't see how his actions wronged those around him. Coming to his senses, however, he did the right thing and did his best to make amends for his wrongdoings, even opening his eyes to the adoration of the woman who'd been by his side since the beginning. Returning her love, he went on to rule Halloween Town with his new pumpkin queen. There's a whole book about that, by the way. Read that book! Read that book! Read that book! Thank you so much for watching. As always, you are so loved. May love guide you. Take care. Bye-bye.